Very good. Good afternoon. It is Monday, February 8th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is a virtual special budget workshop, budget number 3 workshop of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach, called to order at 1:30 p.m. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start off by calling the roll call of Commissioners. Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Edward Chernowski.
Here.
Commissioner Richard Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Pat Caluzzi.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills is here. We have a full complement and are able to formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here, Commissioners, and I also welcome those that are watching and appreciate you being here. Also want to thank the participants who have followed the directions on the bottom of the agenda and registered in advance to be able to speak today, and I will call on you at appropriate times during the meeting. Those registered to speak are Walter Brittingham, Mark Carter, representing the Lewis Rehoboth Canal Improvement Association, Richard Perry, Terry Eskew, Patricia Davis, and Nancy Alexander from the Historical Society Museum. Thank you all for participating today. I would like to acknowledge correspondence that we received. As you know, many of you know, when we receive correspondence a sufficient time ahead of the meeting, we are able to embed it in the agenda. We've got, my count, 26 letters embedded in the agenda. We have another communication from SOLA 3, Save Our Lakes 3, and we welcome all those. We will reference those likely during our discussions later today. Also, the purpose of this meeting is to continue discussion of a draft budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022, and including discussion on the capital improvement program as presented by the city manager. At some point during our discussion, after we get all the preliminaries done, we will then entertain discussions on topics including but not limited to the Lake Gerar Tot Lot renovations, parks master planning, Grove Park Canal Dock, funding, maintenance, etc., and any other topics that the commissioners wish to bring up. So we will start off with, I guess, a general overview. Sharon Lynn, I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Before we get into the proposed budget for 2022, I did briefly want to give you an update of where we are for the first 2/3 of this current year's budget. We have numbers that Mr. Dukes prepared from April through December 31, 2020. And I think every time that we get together and talk about this, the general overall picture gets better, which obviously I say very conservatively, but also relieved a bit because of where we were last summer in particular. So the general fund revenue basically increased a little over $700,000. That's the April to December time period. And the increase is primarily based on the property transfer tax, which we keep talking about because that's been very robust this fiscal year. So the hotel accommodations tax played into that. We're also on target to make budget of $800,000. Right now we have a little over $640,000. We have remaining 3 months. We have about $50,000 to make that budget number $800,000. Briefly again, the property transfer tax is $1.6 million above the prior year, 2019, same period, April through December 2019. And we've already exceeded our our, predicted, budget number for fiscal year '21. I'm also, happy to say that the numbers that we've exceeded, actually does not include January '21, which we did receive last week, and, that's an additional $840,000, to the coffers that you're not seeing in this report. So that's a huge increase and the largest amount of property transfer tax ever collected by the city in any one fiscal year. We go down to mercantile business licenses, and also we indicate why the discrepancy, because last year we made up April through December. That's not comparable to this year because we collected just a bit more, and we changed that collection period this year. Building permits, we're actually short, but, you know, we still have time to make some of that up. Parking revenue, of course, was $2 million. We keep hearing that from last summer, and showing you that we've certainly made up that difference with the property transfer tax and hopefully the hotel accommodations tax. So with that, I don't know, Bert, if you'd like to add anything to that?
Well, I think, on the expense side, we seem to have some discipline. Expenses after we adjusted them, we paid extra principal on our, loan, and that's optional. We had extra money on the city hall loan that the city didn't need. So we returned it to USDA. So after we adjusted for that, our operating expenses were less than the prior year, around $300,000. So that was good news. So not only are we on the revenue side, the expense side is strong too. On water and sewer, we're doing fine. The revenues, we're up about $697,000 in water, but that's primarily because of the increase in rates. I guess there's one schedule in this budget package that I think it's good to see every now and then, and that is the outstanding debt that the city has. And that's on the last page. And it will show you that our debt has actually increased slightly because we're still drawing on the plant loan, $9 million or $12 million plant loan, and that we're gradually drawing down on. And so all the other loans that we had went down, but because of the plant loan increasing to almost $2 million, we had slightly more debt outstanding as of December the 31st than we did on March 31st. But we anticipated that. But I just wanted to make sure that all of the commissioners and public were aware of where we stood right now with respect to our debt. Our debt limit is $75 million. It looks like we will be under that, and I don't anticipate any kind of an emergency, but you never know. But right now we're $13 million under our debt. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bert. Going back, any questions on that, commissioners?
I missed
Briefly go ahead.
I was just saying,
Oh.
I missed most of it because I lost power. I joined on the internet by my phone. I still don't have power.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it looks like we've lost power in North Rehoboth. I'm also working off my phone at the moment.
Yeah, so. I don't know how long my battery will last. We'll see.
Are you able to listen in and, agree to continue participating?
I can, you can see me. I don't know about, Ed, how are you coming in?
Ed, are you all right if we proceed?
Yeah, I'm fine. My cell phone is going to die at some point, but I'm
Mine
fine
too.
proceeding.
Quick, plug it in. Are there any questions, so far on what's been presented by Bert?
I had a hard time
Jay?
hearing, Bert, but, I'll call him on the phone and have him repeat it to me tomorrow or sometime. Cause it's really critical and I missed a lot of it, but,
Were you able to hear me, Commissioner?
ma'am?
Were you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can. I don't know what's going on here. I have power and everything, but,
I thought Bert was a little hard to understand too. Yeah, I think it was just because he wasn't, he was a little further
Okay,
away.
well, we'll have to, like him to repeat.
Does anybody want, Bert, would you like Bert to repeat? He's
I will. I
willing
didn't
to
hear any
start
of it.
over?
Yeah, I
Pat?
think
Pat,
Yes.
yeah,
I think
Pat
so,
kept
Mayor.
being late and I can follow Bert a lot on the narrative, I have that all printed out, but, yeah.
Okay, he'll just do the expense side of it again.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Would you raise your hand if you have trouble hearing so that we can remedy it on this end? Thank you. Bert, go ahead and reiterate if you would.
Well, I wanted to make the point, can you hear me now?
I can
Yes.
hear you fine.
Okay. We were talking about the expenses in the general fund and basically adjusted for the extra principal that we paid on our debt. Our operating expenses compared with the prior year are $300,000 less. I was making the point that the city had not drawn the entire amount of the USDA loan that was available. And so we returned it to USDA. And so that had to be backed out of our numbers because it's a distortion. It really doesn't have anything to do with an operating expense, as far as what we're measuring. So our expenses seem to be under control, and we anticipate that they'll probably stay somewhere around $300,000 less than the prior year for the full year. And so, and compared to budget, it should be fine. I made the point about the debt, and there's the last page of your of the document that was sent out shows our status of outstanding debt, and that's obviously important because we have a $75 million limit and it needs to be monitored. And barring any other emergency borrowings that the city might have, we should have no problem. Now, in the event that something were to happen, we do have available funds that we could use. They've been segregated, and so we have a reserve. But I don't anticipate us having a problem with the debt limit if everything continues as it's expected. That's basically pretty much the summary. Are there any questions or any clarification I could offer?
Bert, if you will, just remind us of the debt limit and also the page number of the outstanding debts as of the 31st.
Okay, it's on the very last page.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 25.
Yeah. And basically, your question, Commissioner Byrne, related to our limit, and the city's limit for debt is $75 million. in order to go beyond that, we'd be required to go to referendum.
Right.
But,
Thank you.
you know, we have reserve cash, so if something happened, we do have a cushion. But if everything continues, the increase, we're gonna be continuing to draw on our loan for the wastewater treatment plant, but that should be offset by the principal reductions that we're having in the other loans. So I don't anticipate at this point a problem with our debt limit.
Any further questions for, Bert? Just Bert only, Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I have two. Bert, you said something about paying down, the loan, and I guess that's in the next fiscal year budget. You still have that in there to pay that down some, the principal?
Well, yeah, there's gonna be principal reduction in the next year on all our loans, with the exception of the plant loan, which we'll continue to draw until it reaches $12 million.
Right, but there's an extra principal reduction in there, not just from making payments, but an extra one, right?
Yes.
Okay. That was the first question, and it's what, about 750,000 or something? Million?
I think it was 486.
No, it's more than that.
Now, what I was talking about was the extra principal payment on the city hall, which was
Right, yeah.
429,000.
Okay, 429 is, okay. I guess the other question is, you had mentioned the increase in, I guess, wastewater revenue, something being mostly attributable to the rate increase. And I guess I wondered if there's any way to know, has there been how's the usage? Is it up because more people have been here? Is it, do we know?
I don't have a number on total gallons of usage right now. I will produce that, but Kevin's here, he has that, but what I was really pointing out, that the total revenue increase is primarily related to the rate increases. But Kevin might have usage totals. Carry on.
I recall last year, pretty much in the summer, we looked at this, and the total usage was pretty much in line with the preceding year, but Kevin will get you some of those numbers more accurately. This is our third budget meeting, as the mayor said, and usually at this time we're, you know, the revenue and the expense side, that's, you have that predicted. We obviously do that conservatively. We're empowered to do that again conservatively for next year, even though we had a great uptick in property transfer tax. So our numbers are conservative. We plan for hopefully some kind of rejuvenation this summer, but we're not sure about that. So our parking revenue numbers are conservative as well. This is pretty much what the 2022 budget looks like. By the third meeting, we need to start concentrating on the CIP, which is what I wanted to do today. Basically, after today, we have 3 more meetings. The last meeting, your regular meeting in March, is usually reserved for adoption of the budget. So if we can concentrate on the CIP, I think that's where I'd like to go. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. Just real quickly on the usage comparison on the water side. In 2019, we used 572 million gallons, and in 2020, 551 million gallons. So roughly 20 million gallons left. So we used 97% of the previous year total. And on the sewer side, in 2019, 419 million gallons. In 2020, 416 million gallons. So 3 million gallons less, for about 99% of what we did the previous year. So they hung in there pretty well, you know, during the pandemic.
Thank you. So before we go to the CIP, is there any other questions or comments? Commissioner Legree?
City manager, the 2 million down on parking, is that 2 million from this time last year? Or is it 2 million from the total of that we are down from a year ago? Were you
Based
able
on
to spread
budget.
that out?
We're talking-
Excuse me, go ahead.
We're measuring against our budget, Commissioner, and, yeah, obviously we were down from the prior year, but, the 2 million is, or 1.99
Yep.
is basically a measurement against the budget. So we were short that much.
And it is summer, most of it is summer revenue, but we do get, obviously, revenue in throughout the year as far as, any enforcement goes, parking tickets. So it's basically 2 million from last summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question addressing the use of the proceeds from the sale of 84 Kent. My philosophy is that the proceeds ought to be used for infrastructure purchases or projects. Bert, can you explain what is proposed in this budget for use of the proceeds from 84 Kent? And if it's not for infrastructure, I'd ask you to please defend.
Well, of the proceeds, and I think this addresses Commissioner Gay's question. She noted that there was a $850,000 higher amount budgeted in 2022 than in prior years. The prior year amounts $986,400,000. Those are basically the payments to USDA, and but the other $850,000 is that's a portion of the proceeds that we have directed toward debt reduction. So it's up to the commissioners, they can change that, but it seems that if you're basically reducing your physical assets, that it was logical to go ahead and reduce your debt at the same time. But that's up to you to decide. So $850,000 is included in debt reduction.
Okay, well, I've said my philosophy. Anybody else? Jay Legree and then Commissioner Calusi?
I absolutely concur with that. It's just, I think.
Concur with who?
With reducing the debt with funds. Because,
okay.
And I'll tell you why, we're gonna have a whopper of capital outlay in FY24 and FY25 because of wastewater upgrades. And the more we can reduce our debt now, the more leeway we have in 24 and 25 to give our citizens a little bit of a break and maybe borrow a third of that or half of that, because if we share that with the county, we're still going to be $6 million down for those 2 fiscal years, and we'll be looking for money any place we can find it. So I love it when we pay down our debt right now, even though I know that the city hall is a USDA loan, but still that reduces the overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, just in terms of the proceeds from 84 Kent, I'm assuming that we're going to have a vote on this in terms of how that money is used. There's different proposals. I know, Mayor, you're saying infrastructure. I'd like to know specifically what you have in mind. It might make sense to do infrastructure, but it might make sense to pay down the loan depending upon where all of the commissioners are coming from in terms of what they're thinking that money should be used for. Thanks.
Well, I guess from my point, infrastructure or paying down the debt might be acceptable. To be blunt, what I would find offensive is using the money from 84 Kent to do a trial year of ride freebie or something that's kind of disposable income, if you will. Commissioner Srnowski? You're muted, man.
My apologies. I agree. I think, paying down the debt or using it on a specific infrastructure project is acceptable ways to utilize that money. And it shouldn't be used on something discretionary like ride freebie or something like that. So I'm in agreement and open to talking more about it, specifically that amount.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree again?
Yeah, Mayor, what year ahead of us do you think that we're gonna be looking at funding the streetscape projects? When will that hit us, and how much, what are you thinking about? I know that you're assuming that it'll be 2080, and I'm hoping that that's the truth, even though the state's funding this first project. But is that going to be in FY 80, FY 27, 28? What are you looking at?
Well, Kevin's gonna respond for me. He's attuned. Thank you, Kevin.
Sure, Mayor. Commissioner, if everything goes according to a schedule that we think is reasonable, so you have to decide on the funding stream, but they would be ready to proceed with an engineering design roughly this time next year. So we would be looking to put a design cost into FY 23's budget for a piece, for all, or some of the streetscape program.
And the engineering design that the state's going to pay for goes in this year? Have you already had RFPs for that, or I'm a little bit,
So the state,
slippery.
the state is doing the concept plan. It's not really a design. So from the concept plan, then we can determine what it is we want to put into a hardcore engineering design. The first piece would be designed next fiscal year,
Okay.
not the current budget we're working on, but the following fiscal year. And then assuming, it takes a year to design a chunk of it, we would be looking for construction costs, some construction costs in fiscal year 2024 for the first piece of whatever we're going to do.
And that you're hoping that'll be 2080, that the state will pay 80 and we'll pay 20. I'm sorry. We don't need to talk about that. Let's talk about it in FY 23 or somewhere up the line.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, I've got two things, but just to tag on to what Commissioner Legree was talking about, this, the state, DelDOT, is going to pay for this, I guess, analysis or concept plan. Have we asked them to also look at, because we're talking about Wilmington, Baltimore, first and second, just sort of a traffic management plan, maybe with that? I did a little bit of a look-see at the Rossi website, and that seems to be something that they also do. I'm wondering if that's something that we might consider either tagging on to that or just talking to DelDOT separately. I'm not sure that everybody thinks we need a traffic management plan. I personally think we do, but that's one thing. The other is going to talking about the sewer, the plant. As everyone knows, we talked to the county at one point, and I'm wondering if that's completely dead or something that we might want to revisit with the county. I think that we determined that if in fact we wanted to move forward with them, we could work with our own metering system to send the bills to the clients that would be metered. So I guess I raised a question: is it off the table, or do we want to approach the county again to see if this is something that we might want to consider in some way? So I leave it at that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, just Bert, if you could remind me on the City Hall payment that we made with regards to the 84 Kent revenue, what is our current interest rate on that loan?
On the, loan for the, for which,
I'm sorry.
City Hall loan, it's, yeah, look, I've got it's in your document, but I'm trying to flip to it real quick. And,
You can come back to it later. Just curious, the cost of money.
well, I've got it now, finally. Yeah, the rate on the USDA loan, which was for the construction of City Hall, was 2.375%.
And that's a 20-year loan? Or
It was 25, but the terms have been shortened because when we made the extra principal payment, USDA does not create a new amortization schedule. They just make you keep on paying what was originally scheduled. So the end result is, if we do that, we're going to pay the principal off a couple years earlier on one of the loans.
Okay,
But it was a 25-year loan.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Any other comments? If not, Sharon, you want to move on to capital improvement program?
Yes, thank you. Basically, this is the same as what you saw, last time, so, there are no changes to this. I'm happy to go through it, department by department, if that's how you'd like to proceed. Unless you have any questions, in particular, we can certainly, talk about that.
Let's go in order.
Okay,
You know, just,
okay.
and can you reference any pages that, we should turn to?
Certainly. So it starts on page 42 and ends on page 49. First capital outlay you have is for Department 103, the administration, and that's for the alterations to City Hall to the reception desk.
Thank you.
5 is the IT department, and there's annual desktop computer replacements, fiber for the boardwalk, Lynchwell communications equipment replacement, and surveillance at the water and wastewater department.
Any questions? Speak up as, we go to them, otherwise we'll keep on moving on.
For the police department, they've managed to not have too many capital outlays this year. One vehicle in particular, and police radios. For a total of $20,527 in the police department. As we usually see in the streets department, there's a hefty CIP, but please remember that many of the items Many of those items in the streets department were deferred this year because of the pandemic, and they were again submitted for 2022. Total in the streets department, $1,107,845.
Sharon, for the electrical vehicle charging station, new charging stations, plural, to replace the old outdated ones at Henlopen. Are they replacing them in place? The ones at Henlopen will come out and new ones go in?
So the ones at Henlopen come out, and then this is a new charging station here at the public parking lot.
At the City Hall parking lot?
Yes.
Okay. And is that, there are two at the Henlopen, and many of them are in the City Hall parking lot?
4.
4, so we're going from 2 at the Henlope into 4, okay. Thank you.
Of course, we have the, comfort station, back in at Delaware Avenue, the restrooms that, the upgrades that we were looking to make there, and also, nothing this year for Baltimore Avenue.
Excuse me, City Manager, just one
Fine.
one quick question. The LED retrofit for Rehoboth Avenue in the median there, that has just been postponed for a year or pushed off to further years?
On Rehoboth Avenue,
Yes.
what did we need there?
Suggested pushing it.
Yeah, we did push it a year, yes.
Okay.
And Delaware Avenue is just what we pushed it into 2022. Baltimore Avenue, you see a 0 in the capital improvement plan, but the, design for that is actually in the operating budget. No,
But I think maybe there is a 1 in that quantity, if I'm reading Bert's chart correctly, but that is for the design at 120,000 for the Baltimore Avenue restroom expansion.
Oh, oh,
okay, so we skipped down a line, or we
Yeah,
skipped up a line.
I think comfort station.
Okay, we're off a line, okay.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's Bert's fault.
It's municipal. The way the report prints out.
Page breaks.
So the design is included for Baltimore Avenue.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
the actual construction is there for Delaware Avenue. The Capitol Buildings and Grounds, looking for a lift for the convention center to be able to do some work there at $6,800. Dispatch is another replacement of portable radios. And, the, parking department, this is our third and final, phase for T2 meters. Next we have the, Tot Lot enhancements. I don't know, Mayor, if you want to go to that now or you want to skip.
No, I'd like to skip it and go
Okay.
over this, and then we'll do the
Okay.
heavier topics, toward the end.
Okay, beach patrol, we have some minor capital outlays, one, involving the, replacement Polaris, they use that quite a bit. And then, we get into, the water department capital outlay and the wastewater department capital outlay. For a total of $4,870,172. So we have a balanced budget again. We have a, I can't say it enough that we budget very conservatively on the revenue side. And certainly department heads were advised this year to keep it pretty sparse in the expense department, and they turned in, I would say, very favorable budgets, knowing that we have another possible year ahead of us with decreased revenue.
The sewer line rehabilitation program, $400,000 in the budget. Is this similar to the street paving program where it's pretty much ongoing for many years into the future?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So that we don't know an ending for this, that it stops in 2 years or, okay, very good. Any questions, at this point from the commissioners, just on what we've talked about so far? Commissioner Legree?
I just want to remind everybody that this phase 4 treatment plan upgrades, which is on line 72 and the one that I happen to be looking at, has got $6 million a year in FY 24 and FY 25. And then in FY 26, it drops down to zip. And obviously those numbers were just put in there as markers. And it's going to require a lot of discussion when we get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I want to take a short break. Our next thing, I think, would be these big capital projects. In the meantime, let's just go to the public real quick for comments solely on anything we've talked to date. Again, the next set of discussions will include Lake Gerar Tot Lot, Parks Master Planning, Grove Park, and any other topics. But for now, are there any questions or comments you have up to the discussion at this point? We got Walter Brittingham. Mark Carter's not on yet. He's here specifically for the canal dock. Richard Perry, or Rick, are you there? I don't think he's on. Terry Askew. You want to wait for the tot lot discussion?
Yes, I would like to wait for the tot lot.
All right, and Patricia Davis, ditto, you want to wait for the tot lot topic?
No comment. No
Okay.
comment.
All right, and Nancy Alexander, are you on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All
Would
right.
you like to comment on anything up to this point?
Well, I was here to just give my little report, so you tell me when the good time for me to do that is.
Thank you, Nancy. I know that the commissioners did receive your report, and no, commissioners, if you had any questions about that, Nancy was very kind to be able to put together what actually is in the museum's report and what activities are pursued there. I don't know if anyone had any questions about that.
Well, we'll take a pause before we go continue with the capital improvements as big projects, and welcome Nancy and see if anybody has any, commissioners have any questions for Nancy in reference to seeking funding to help the museum.
It was an excellent report. I support continuing to fund them at the levels we budgeted.
Thank you, Susan. Commissioner Legree?
Since September, I've been the liaison with the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, and I continue to be impressed by the way they handle their money. I mean, it's just amazing to me how well they can do that. So that's not a question, it's a comment, but they're doing a super job. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, I too continue to support the museum, but just curious as to what direction or what agency or your board or what have you directs you for your reopening selection date or process of reopening. Is there any target in that aspect of when you might, or who guides you for reopening?
Well, we're saying spring. We are pulling together several things. I got a grant from the Delaware Community Foundation recently, and part of that grant was to pay for acrylic barriers at the front desk. We've also acquired a touchless pin pad, and that will require my installing that. So I'll need lots of coffee and chocolate for that, but I'm going to get that done soon. And we normally do open our annual summer exhibit on Memorial Day weekend. So we're going to try to hold to that and do a little soft opening a week before that. And then we're hoping we can be open on a limited hours basis, probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just to start and see how things go.
And are those decisions guided by your board?
I'm going to be presenting, our next board meeting is March. I'm going to be presenting what I think would be a good plan to the board. And yes, the board will end up making that final decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Srnowski?
Nancy, thank you for the report. It was very good, and I too support continuing the city support at the levels we've budgeted for. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Nancy, you lucked out, and we'll let you go if you like. Thank you for participating.
Thank you very much. I lost power. Well, I don't have power here at the museum, so I'm just talking to you on my phone. I just wanted to say, Stan, I'm sorry I didn't get on the last time. Christina was home, and she remembers you from her Girl Scout presentation and wanted to say hello. So hello, Christina. And believe it or not, she's 20 years old. Just last week. So time
Been a while. Goodness gracious.
It has been a while.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, we'll continue with the capital improvement projects discussion. I'd like to take it in this order: Lake Gerar Tot Lot renovations, Parks master planning if desired, and Grove Park Canal Dock funding. If you recall, Parks master planning came in when at some point some commissioners, one or more, indicated that the Tot Lot renovations ought to come along with Parks master planning or be deferred till Parks master planning. I do want to acknowledge again of the 27 letters received. I think everyone mentioned the park. Suzanne Good went on, and her email communication further went in questions about the canal dock. But I'd like to just do a quick summary in my mind of what I read in the 20-some letters. They were largely very similar. A reference to the Tot Lot at Lake Gerar was maintain it in the same footprint. Do not expand the Tot Lot. Do not cut down more trees, save the trees. Therefore, do not expand. Keep as a Tot Lot. Do not expand as a playground. Spend $100,000, not $350,000. Spend $100,000, not $250,000. They were comments unfavorable to the Gerar master plan. ADA is good, but only for the Tot Lot size. Don't make it ADA and a bigger playground. Some were concerned about the watershed if it was expanded. Some suggested that no master planning need take place right away, which would delay renovating the Tot Lot. Those are just my interpretations of a lot of things. We did have one letter out of all those that did say go for it, spend the $350,000 and enlarge it and continue to promote it as a family place to gather. To start this topic, I'd like to suggest that two things be addressed by Sharon or Liz Lingo. One has to do with ADA requirements. You know, one of the things, components of the renovation was it would be ADA compliant. And I'd like Liz to address this. Is ADA compliance required? Do we have any ADA compliant park playgrounds now? And then a question for the commissioners is, do we want an ADA compliant Tot Lot and or an ADA compliant playground? I think those need to be or should be answered today. The other question has to do with explaining the progression of monies funded for this. There's reference in these letters of $100,000 being projected in the budget from a year ago. There's also a mention of $250,000 being projected in the budget from a year ago. And then, of course, the most recent mention of $350,000. So if we could just get a little update on a summary of how we got to these different figures, I think it would be helpful. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon or Liz for them to address those two questions. And then we'll turn it over to the commissioners. And after the commissioners have their time, we'll go to the members of the public who are signed up and registered to speak today.
Mayor, thank you. I'll jump in just quickly before Liz. I would reiterate that Liz for last budget year and this budget year, has consistently said that, ADA, an ADA park, playground, is, favorable, I'll say, and pretty much what is required for us to at least have one. We thought that since, the Tot Lot at Lake Gerar needs to be refurbished at all the equipment needs to be removed there, that would probably be the best place. We did come up with a $350,000 figure that was reduced to $250,000. We needed to put that amount in because we're seeking grant funding. We assume favorably that we will receive particular grant funding, but the funds needed to be in there in order for us to be able to at least apply and receive that grant money, to show them in good faith that the city was contributing, I'll say approximately $150,000. So the expansion, and anything can be done here. We can just replace the equipment. We can make it ADA, which is preferable, and not touch anything else. Liz, I'll turn it over to you. You can correct me if I misstated anything, but that's what I heard for the last 2 years.
You're pretty much right on. So I can address some of the ADA, which is based off of, so in 2010, the ADA standards were updated, okay? And that basically said any playground remodeled or constructed from 2012 on has to meet the 2010 standards. Has to meet it. There is no other option, okay? Legally, there in insurance and all that, there's no other option. And as part of those ADA requirements, there's kind of 3 baselines in a playground. So number 1, you have to be able to get to the playground on a hard surface path. None of our playgrounds meet that currently. Number 2, well, and also as part of that, you have to be able to get around to the equipment once you're actually in the playground. So if a lot of our playgrounds actually have a wooden barrier, including Lake Gerar, both the swing set and the existing Tot Lot. And part of that also includes wheelchair has to have a turning radius of a minimum of 5 feet. So that expands your typical space, and that can't overlap with any equipment use zones. The second part is the equipment and surfacing all has to meet ASTM, which is the American Society for Testing and Materials, 1951, which is the accessibility of surfacing systems. So basically, they have to have an accessible surface for anybody of any ability to get around with. And then the third portion is relating to the actual accessible play equipment. So it's scaled, it's divided into 2, so ground level and elevated. Ground level, you have a minimum of 1 accessible piece of play element that has to be available. And then depending on how many play elements you offer, it goes up from there. And then elevated, half of your play elements have to be accessible, which includes ramping or partial ramping. And because of that is why the size of the playground has to expand. There's no way in a 5,000 square foot playground to have all that accessibility, to have the right number of play elements, unless all we want to have is like a swing set, would be what it came down to, because of all the space required for them to safely navigate and the minimum number of elements. Now, on top of the ADA, and this is where it gets tricky, there's a number of ASTM standards that are recommended for safety. To me, a recommendation for a safety standard is not a recommendation, it's a requirement. We're not going to do something that is not 100% safe. So that's where you get into elements like fencing and barriers, the attenuation of the surfaces, and all the other odds and ends that go into making a playground safe and accessible. So I don't know if you want me to stop there, if anybody has questions about ADA and ASTM.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do the commissioner questions, if you don't mind, Liz, and maybe it's easier to react. I would like to put one addendum on my interpretation of some of the letters that we received, and I omitted one, and that's just their concern was voiced over the watershed being impacted if it expanded. I would like to remind everybody that while there were some comments in the letters about the Lake Gerar master plan, you might recall there was a plan presented to maybe a year ago that had a kayak launch, an amphitheater, water feature, and different things. That is not intended to be discussed today. That is a future discussion we can put on the agenda and focus on that in the future if we want to go that direction. But again, I'm trying to manage our time. And our focus today should be on the tot lot itself. With that, we'll go to commissioner questions.
I have one main question, Liz. Last year, and I don't think you were at the meeting where we finalized it and put the 100,000 in the budget, but the question was asked that day, and I think it was the second February meeting, when Sharon said, okay, we're going to put 100,000 in the budget. That was kind of the compromise we came to at the meeting before. And I or somebody asked the question, is it going to be ADA compliant? And the answer was yes. So the feeling I got at the time was that that was a good compromise, that we were able to have, because I totally support having the ADA equipment, absolutely. But I was under the impression it could be done in the same footprint. Now today I hear it can't be done in the same footprint.
Well, I should put the caveat in that I've undergone a lot of playground training since then. So a lot of those things, so I had the certified playground safety inspector as well as director school through the National Parks and Recreation Association. And that's where we start talking about all the quote unquote voluntary safety. So something like the fencing, for example, that changed dramatically. And the number of play elements and stuff like that, that's what led to, because we had originally just cut all that stuff out and we're hoping to get grant money to reinstate it. And I honestly don't remember the footprint being a big issue last year, but it's been a year, so maybe I'm wrong with that.
I think it was, in the sense that nobody wants to lose those trees. And also in the sense that it should remain a tot lot versus an older children. And so I thought that was part of the size thing as well. Just trying to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because now here we are a year later, construction prices have gone up minimum of 10, maybe up to 20%, sometimes 30 on certain things like fencing. So it gets difficult 1 year later. And like I said, it's not, do we want ADA equipment? If we put a playground back, it has to meet those bare minimums. There is no other option that we can entertain.
Yeah.
So,
and could we keep it the same size? Yeah. But like I said, I think at that point we'll have swings and that's it.
Well, I think it might be worth investigating definitively what can we do in that footprint, and go from there. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Commissioner Gay asked the question that I was going to ask, or at least we got at the information, and then you just clarified it a bit in terms of a comment that I was going to make. So, Liz, what do you, given the pushback you've been seeing and hearing about these things, have you thought about like a compromise plan? In other words, increasing the footprint enough to have kind of a viable tot lot, but not increasing it so much that we lose the trees and so on. So that's one question. And then you had talked about the accessible kind of surface that's required for ADA. Is that surface a permeable or impermeable surface, do you know? And if it
Yes.
is permeable, how permeable?
Well, it is permeable. The how permeable varies. I mean, you can get it where it soaks up way more rainwater and stormwater than that. I want to say turf we have there than what we have currently. I mean, you can get these recycled rubber where they take 300 or 4,000 gallons a square foot an hour. So that really relies on the specific product we choose more than anything. And that seems to be the most chosen surfacing in the US right now for basically the impact, the low maintenance, and the environmental. Because right now we use the engineered wood fibers, and environmentally they're not friendly because it's virgin wood. So even if it's sustainably logged to get it, it's still logging. So.
Okay, so then the first question I asked.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, can you repeat your first question? What was it?
Yeah, I guess. So have you thought about kind of a compromise footprint that would save the trees, but still create a viable size tot lot for youngsters?
Yeah,
that would have more than swings, but wouldn't take up nearly as much room as taking the trees down.
Yeah, so this is where my professional opinion goes against everybody else. To me, Japanese pines that are already older than they should be are not worth attempting to work around and preserve. So we're not going to randomly take them out, but they're not recommended and they're invasive for a reason. So if anybody has paid attention over by the VIA, we've lost about a half a dozen in the last 2 years due to nematode and borers. And there's no real treatment for that nematode, and black pines only live to be around 30 years old, and ours are already older than that. So to me, to make design considerations based off an invasive species that's at the peak of its life doesn't make sense. Now, we did try around with some different locations, but generally you want a playground. And this was something I know they mentioned in the 2010 CDP, is that the parks really aren't signed or labeled, and things aren't pointed out and things aren't obvious. So something as important as this, we kind of want front and center, really. We want the public to be able to see it. We want them to drive down the road and say, oh my gosh, look at that amazing playground, not have it hidden behind a bunch of trees tucked back into a corner. And then on top of that, we do want, there's a big campaign that basically everybody has a great park within 10 minutes of them. And we want to try and keep our playgrounds that way too, within a 10-minute walk. So this geographically, our playgrounds are laid out really well, and we wanted to kind of keep that same feel.
Okay, thank you. And then Mayor, a comment, because it's not on the agenda, as you said, and so it's not up for discussion today. And maybe I'm missing something, but my comment is, I don't understand why a budget would have playground enhancement a year before we put any funding toward master planning. To me, it's backwards. Just a comment. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we can certainly address that because that's on here, if anybody wants to. With that, we can come back to it if we'd like. Commissioner Legree?
I need to get this on the record. Am I correct in understanding that every playground in the United States or in a municipality, if it's to be upgraded, it has to be made ADA compliant? We have no choice on that whatsoever. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct.
And have we had in my research, I've discovered that there's something called a certified playground inspector. And have we had a certified playground safety inspection? And has that been documented? And have we itemized the equipment that needs to be replaced? And have we put dollar numbers on that so we can have a much better idea of what we're voting for?
So we've had 3 CPSIs examine the equipment, possibly 4. Not sure if he is, including myself. And there really is, the only thing that's salvageable there is we have 2 bucket swings and 1 regular swing. Everything else, because of the rubberized coating on the existing play structure is compromised, as well as structural rust. So the main unit is not viable. And then there's only 1 other little rocker and a balance beam. And the rocker actually isn't compliant either because it's installed at too high of a level.
Has this been documented and itemized?
I'm not sure what you mean by itemized, but yes, all inspections are documented.
And replacement costs? I'm sorry, itemized replacement costs.
Well, itemized for what? Because once we get into replacement, it has to become ADA. So that's where we get into 100,000, 200,000.
And if I may, Commissioner LaBrie, we put all that together last year. You saw a few different plans of different equipment that was suggested for that. So that was included in this year's budget last year at this time by Liz. And also, I'll just say the city was paying for inspections, and now Liz herself is an inspector. So she was trained and certified and took the exams for that. So she is now the certified playground inspector for the city.
If that was presented to us last year, 3 of us were not on board, so.
Okay, you're right.
That's okay. I don't remember some stuff from like last week, so.
Commissioner LaGree, anything else?
I'm trying to add the numbers up and I can't. I just can't add them all up. I hear 100,000 and then I hear, no, that's not right. It's going to be more than that. And I'm asking myself, well, okay, do we know? Do we have numbers? Oh
yeah, we have itemized estimate from, now we haven't put our contractor through the ringer again for this year. So he told me prices went up 10 to 20%, lead time increased. And then we added also in the fencing, which I budgeted at 50,000, and that's a hopeful budget, quite honestly. Fencing has gotten very expensive. And then I added in a $25,000 budget for landscaping and installation of a small green infrastructure practice. So that gets us from the 250 to the 350. And the 100,000 was related to us banking on getting grant money.
I mean, I'm really hesitant to expand the footprint of that tot lot. I just don't see that in my future. But I can be outvoted. The overriding concern is not to alter the watershed and to keep that into stormwater management and expanding. I'm really hesitant to think positively about that. Yeah, and I'd love to see that. I'd love to see those numbers. I just love it. So far, I haven't. And let me see what else I had. Oh, you talked about a time constraint a week ago, I think, and you said that the tot lot needs to be done quickly, and my notes are unclear on that. Where does that deadline come from?
I'm not sure. I don't remember saying that, but it might have been just in reference to right now, the playground is not safe. It's not usable. So we have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to tear it down and build something new, or we're going to tear it down and seed it over with grass. And then keeping in mind that our contractor does have about a 2-month lead time. And that doesn't even allow us any time, because I had originally planned to consult with the experts at the consortium, as well as our local Montessori, to have some of the children have a little bit of input on different play elements we have in there. So this wasn't by any means the 100% final. We wanted to do a little bit of community interaction with that.
Okay, I'm just waiting I'm waiting for a number.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. I find this very enlightening and maybe a cautionary note too, that if we have to upgrade each playground into ADA compliance, we have playgrounds, and of course, at the Lake Gerar Tot Lot, we have them over at the Stokely Silver Lake Park there. We've got them in Grove Park. If each one of those has to become ADA compliant, then the footprint for each playground area essentially has to be enlarged to accommodate ADA compliance, or we have to reduce the number of playground equipment at each spot. So that, for me, that's just food for thought. That so we need, I guess, to come back again and focus on the Lake Gerar Tot Lot and see what the path forward is. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, I want to go on the record here. It was very disappointing to see all these letters that were claiming that the surface was impermeable, which we've been told was permeable. We were told that last time. So I don't know where that came from. Also, the idea that the trees are, and this has been mentioned by, I guess, Commissioner LeGree, you're concerned about the trees, and in fact, our arborist has told us things are invasive species. You know, trees, just because the trees are there, don't mean they need to be saved. They're going to be replaced with something that's more appropriate for the area. So I'm very supportive of moving. I know it's a lot of money, but we have to do something. And the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. And the problem I see right now is that it's not usable equipment. If we keep, dithering here and not doing anything, it's just going to be ripped out and there'll be no playground. So I really feel that I agree with Commissioner LeGree, and that we need the numbers in terms of, okay, just an itemized list of things that, this is what the playground's going to be and this is how much it costs. But I'm supportive of it. We need to do it. And so I think that, that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, thank you. Just to help with a little nomenclature here, we keep using the term tot lot. And is that, as a certified playground inspector, is that a true term that is used when establishing a playground area? Is that based on the amount, the size, the type of equipment? What is there such a definition as tot lot?
It's typically referred to as for younger children, but from our Mind Mixer survey last year, we found out that pretty much all ages of children use all of the playgrounds. So whether they're called a tot lot or a playground, it didn't really matter. And most of them have mixed use equipment in them anyways nowadays.
Thanks. And with regards to grant funding, I know we had talked about grant funding in here as we do, but that would be dependent on ADA compliance, correct?
Oh, yes, of course. And there are more grants available for some of this inclusive equipment. There's the Dana and Christopher Reeves Foundation that have a great grant program. And then also last week, our playground company, Liberty, they contacted the city manager and they hired a full-time, I forget the title they used, but basically a full-time staff member to assist their clients with obtaining grants and alternative sources of funding. So this new person is available for our use. And I just think that's such a great asset to have.
And following along the mayor's comments here, do we currently have any city operated ADA play area lots that are ADA compliant?
No, all of our playgrounds were built prior to, and we're not including the Grove Park Fitness area because that's not a playground. But the playgrounds, tot lots, and the swing set were all installed prior to the 2010 ADA requirements taking effect. And as the mayor stated, they may not need to expand footprint wise because they're already much larger to start, but the cost is, believe me, I was surprised when we started going in how much all this equipment costs when I first started working here, even the maintenance and topping the wood fibers. It's all very expensive when you're talking about playgrounds. And we need to keep in mind that this is just the first playground. Our other two are old. They were built in, I think, 2005, 2008. They may not have much longer either.
Thank you, Liz. Commissioner Gay?
That's a perfect segue into, and thank you, Liz, for saying that, into something that I've been wondering about, which is that, do we have, I don't see anything in the capital improvement budget for the next 5 years anyway about replacing any other playground, but I have wondered, if we have a sort of an obsolescence plan, do we know when those are going to be up for repair? Because, I mean, Mayor mentioned one big issue, which is the footprint of them and some of the considerations there, but there's also the cost. And should those start appearing in our budget 2-3 years out, because it's not there now? So that looks like a big cost for those other playgrounds.
Yes. So I keep a working list of all our inventory and assets. So like we just added all the features of the new canal dock and included their replacement timeframe and estimated budget for it. And so they're not quite up in the 5-year plan, estimating at 20-year longevity. But it will be coming up, and they're all, unfortunately, when we installed these two playgrounds, the Grove and Stokely, we installed them in a pretty close time frame. So that means they'll probably have to be replaced in a pretty close time frame.
Okay, now that's a longer term issue, of course. The short term issue I was going to ask about was in terms of lead time. I understand things are taking longer. No matter what we approve, you can't start on it till April 1. Is that right?
Yes, and then don't forget, we'll have permitting requirements. So we'll have erosion control for the demolition, right? So whether we just knock it down in replacement, we'll have a couple of different things. And then, like I said, we wanted to put some effort into the landscaping and the tree planting and a small green infrastructure project. So we can kind of bring everything full circle, because as people have mentioned, conservation is important. It's one of the 3 main pillars of Parks and Recreation. And part of that conservation, sorry, got tongue tied, is honoring our native ecosystems, right? So not our non-natives, but our natives, and then balancing use with development. And I think that's what this conversation is led to, is balancing the use of the park with the development. And I think a 1/4 acre playground within a 14 to 15 acre park is reasonable, but that's what everybody seems to be upset about.
All right, let me back up a step, because in terms of the timing, I guess what I'm asking is, no matter what we do, there runs a chance we wouldn't have it in for this season anyway. Is that right?
No, I don't believe so. I think we can get it done this season. There might, and part of this relies on COVID, right? Because the playgrounds have been shut down because they have to be, the most recent iteration was they have to be sanitized after each group of children. And we obviously don't have 4 staff members to stand guard and do that. But come into summer, if we're still in that, we're going to have to rethink and maybe allocate for that, because I don't see how we can get through another year with the playgrounds closed in season.
Okay. Okay. So, but there's still an issue whether we would have it this year or whether we would be able
this year being this summer.
Yes. This summer.
I mean, April. I think it's possible, given lead time, design time, because we have an idea of whether or not things will get approved in the budget. So we can start, we can get the updated estimates, we can start our outreach, that type of stuff, move forward with landscaping design if we think that we're going to be able to do the playground.
And I guess 2 other comments I wanted to make about the trees is, I'm responding there, and I certainly take your point about wanting better trees. The problem is that's what people like that park because of the shade. They like the playground. Even parents like the playground because of the shade. So many people have told me this. They don't know that they may not be ideal trees. They just know they like what's there. And we all know that when new trees go in, they won't provide that kind of shade. So we do need to do some advanced planning and maybe a little bit of both, where you don't take them all out at once. I mean, I think that's what people are reacting to. You know, I appreciate the nature of the tree of those particular species, but people don't want to lose all that shade. And I frankly, I don't think we should either. So it would be nice if maybe that, you know, we had a long range plan for that as well. And I guess the other thing I would say, especially related to where it fits in from a proportionate part of the park, I'd go back to something Commissioner Burns said, which is that it seems to be, if we're looking at it that way, then we ought to have a plan for the entire park first. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, look, in my view, we have to replace the tot lot. It's at its useful end of life. To replace it, we have to make it ADA compliant. If we keep it in that spot and make it ADA compliant within the footprint that's there, it's going to be reduced to possibly just a swing set, maybe one other thing, who knows, but minimal. It draws me back, I guess, to Commissioner Burns' comment earlier. Is there a compromise size? With that, I'll go to Commissioner Byrne and then Commissioner Chernowski.
Thank you. And Liz, thanks for all the great info. I don't want to belabor this thing on trees, but I just want to go back to it. Your response and your discussion with Commissioner Gay was very helpful. But people can, and I'm in agreement with what Commissioner Gay said about people's attitudes toward the existing trees. So would you just go on record that, will every tree that's taken out be replaced? And then what size would those trees be? Are they going to be little dinky things that wouldn't have, you know, shade for 20 years? Or are they going to be trees that'll have shade in a couple of years?
So if you look at our record for the city since I've been here, we have the good favor of having about a 3-to-1 replacement record for tree plantings. So that means pretty much every tree we take out, we end up putting 3 back in. I don't see any reason why we couldn't be at least 2 for 1 on this project if we're going to do I've always envisioned a linear planting to provide a little bit of shade and soften up the edge of the road and have that kind of tree-lined street that is really part of, I think, everybody's vision for Rehoboth. That's one of the driving aesthetic factors. And I would say they'd be canopy trees. Now, that being said, I don't count the Japanese pines that are there as canopy trees. They have some height to them, but if you look at the actual form and structure, a lot of them spread much wider than tall. And part of the playground safety is you really don't want tree limbs or trees right up against a playground. It creates a safety hazard.
That's really helpful. Thank you. But so what would be the height of these replacement canopy trees when they're planted?
So generally, when you install a tree, a single stem canopy tree, they'll be between 10 and 12 feet tall. So it's kind of interesting because on the residential side, we require a 3-inch caliper 12-foot tree, but the research has shown, and my personal experience backs this up, is you're better with a little bit of a smaller tree to start, like around 2 to 2.5 inch. And within 2 to 3 years, that'll outgrow the 3-inch tree. So that's been my favored size for planting.
Good to hear. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Edward Chernowski, Commissioner, next, and then if there's no question, we'll entertain the public, please.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm just trying to think of a path to move us forward here. We're talking a lot, but it sounds like, I think what would be helpful for all of us in making a decision is to have that copy of what Liz provided us last year in the budget season, which I think had a conceptual sketch of what would be the replacement, and then an itemized list of what the equipment is and the cost of each piece of equipment. And then maybe a little, to further Commissioner Burns' question about trees, how many trees are being taken out, how many trees will be planted. I know all of this is not going to be, 100% for sure, but at least a guess on what's going to happen with this project. Because it sounds to me like the public is very interested in knowing what the size change of the playground will be, how many trees are going to be taken out, and then what they're replaced with. So I think having those details would be helpful moving this forward or not.
Okay, well, Commissioner, I do have like you said, the itemized list from last year for the actual equipment. In terms of a true landscape plan, we won't finalize that until we have the design of the playground, because that's what it'll be dependent on. Not to say I don't have in my head what I want it to look like, but
and I don't think it has to be an official plan. It just, I think the public is going to want to hear that we're going to at least plant one tree for every tree that's taken out. I think just some assurances for the public on the general concept, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, we'll definitely have at least 2 per tree removed, because if you look at the proposed topography, the proposed topo map I shared last time, there's not as many trees coming out as, like, all of the trees pretty much to the north and the east are being retained. It's just like 5-ish of the pines to the west, and then the 3 sad London planes that sit in that triangle randomly in the middle of the lawn. So the majority of the pines are going to be retained and still will be adjacent to the playground, just a few feet.
Thank you. I was not expecting that we would come to conclusions today, that we would engage in conversation and hear the public. Just a quick note to remind us that the budget hearing number 4 would be on February 19th, Friday at 9 a.m. And that is a point where I do expect we would need to come to a conclusion on this. With that, we'll go to Commissioner Gossett and then Commissioner Cluzy before we go to the public.
Yes, thank you. Just one clarification, Liz, if you can. The city is not required to have an ADA play area currently, but if we are to remodel or to expand or make any changes to existing, that's when we have to meet ADA requirements. Is that an accurate statement?
That's my understanding of it. That being said, it's a huge liability not to have one compliant universal playground in a municipality.
I understand that, but I guess the point is that we are not in a situation now where we are not compliant with ADA standards. Is that correct?
We are not compliant with the standards, but since we haven't done anything, we haven't had to come up to code, so to speak. So the minute we start changing out equipment or tearing things down, we have to meet those standards. So just your normal day-to-day maintenance of like replacing a couple of swing belts and, upping the wood fibers doesn't mean we have to come in compliance. So we've not done anything wrong. We just haven't kept up with the code because we don't have any new playgrounds.
So that the phrase grandfathered in, if you will, is appropriate. Kind of.
Nobody in code or any of that likes the word grandfather, but yeah, to an extent.
But going forward, any action that we would take other than just completely taking it out and turning it into a grassy area, we would have to meet ADA requirements.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Coluzzi?
Yes, just quickly. So Liz, I appreciate you letting us know that the trees on I believe you said, the south side and the north side, or the south side and the east side would stay, the pines? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I can share my screen with you if you guys want to see the proposed overlay. But yeah, the majority of the trees, I'm counting them on my other screen right now. 3, 4, 5, 6. So 12, 13, 14, 15. Looks like about 15 of the pines would stay out of about 20.
Oh, I think that's good to hear. I mean, from my perspective, I don't think it's great that we have trees that are invasive, but, people seem to like those, but I am glad to hear that you're replacing the other ones with something that is native to our area. And I think the 26 letters that were sent in, hopefully people will hear about this and will understand that in fact is going to be the case. So, yeah, I think that's really critical. And just one more thing, we've talked about this in the past. I don't know if people remember, but more than likely we're going to get a grant for this. So I know people are really concerned about the cost of this. And, as we move forward, depending upon what we get is what we might be able to do and what kind of funds we might have to put forward. So I think it's something we just have to keep in mind and think positively, and hopefully it will happen.
Yeah, we're very lucky that we historically have a great track record with the ORPT grant, where we've, to my knowledge, gotten funding from pretty much every project we've applied for. So I would hope that this, being such a premier project and such a laudable one to have a universal accessible playground, would generate the same interest in grant monies.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you all. Commissioner Legree, I'd really like to go to the public. Do you want to go first or wait till after?
I will wait and make a comment afterwards. I think we're going to find out that we have tremendous pushback if we try to enlarge the tot lot.
Thank you. Well, let's listen to the public. Walter Bingham, would you like to comment on?
No comment. No comment.
Thank you very much. Mark Carter's here for the Lewis Rehoboth Canal Improvement Association. Rick Perry. Is he still on? No. Terry Eskew.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First of all, thanks for all your time and energy and your endurance as you consider so many varieties of issues that are in the budget. A couple of things that I wanted to go back to. Commissioner Burns had asked a couple of times about compromising on the playground. That issue was not really answered, as far as I think what he might have been alluding to is the size or the layout of the playground. This has kind of turned into a situation where it's being painted as an either or. It's either, we go with the little tot lot. We've been told that there's only, a swing that might be available there, or we go to this quarter-acre footprint, which is shown, which incidentally, I don't understand why that footprint is based on exactly the same footprint as the 2019 master plan, which everybody opposed. Because if you look at that footprint, it's a very odd shape. It has a very straight line to the east side, which according to the master plan, that was where a sidewalk is to be planned for the future. But nonetheless, the reason I wanted to speak today is because after the January 15th meeting, I ended up contacting about 30 people who either live in that area, have kids that play on the tot lot, or use the park just for an enjoyment. 26 of those people ended up sending you emails. I never represented that the proposed playground was going to have a non-permeable surface. I always emphasized, yes, it was permeable. The issue is not money here. The issue is the fact that people enjoy the park for its natural aspects. They want to minimize, within ADA compliance, which we all agree with, they want to minimize any artificial elements that are introduced there. And if I can go back to two things I wanted to mention. On line 76 of the budget last year, the $100,000 was approved, and it does say ADA enhancements. That's on line 76. So I don't understand one of the things that Liz just said was that she wants people to drive by the park and say, wow, what a playground. No, we are a Tree City USA. We are not a Playground City USA. We celebrate Arbor Day and plant trees. We don't celebrate Playground Day and enlarge playgrounds. No. What people's comments to me were that they want to keep it as natural as possible. Now, the other thing I want to point out is online, there are playground designers and playground manufacturers that do show ADA compliant playground equipment on less than 5,000 square feet. And believe me, it is more than just a playground. I mean, I'm sorry, just a swing set. So the other issue I want to talk about is I'm a member of the Trees Committee, Trees and Green Infrastructure. For years now, and including last year, Liz told one of our members that she did not want to plant trees in Lake Gerar, the Lake Gerar area because they don't survive. And now all of a sudden we're hearing that, oh, don't worry, we'll replace trees 2 for 1 down there. It does make sense. I don't know, I would like to know what her species are that she's referring to because I'm all in favor of planting. One thing I do say in summary is this. So we all agree compliancy is required. The tot lot as it is being used by children and adults. If it is a liability, if it is a danger, I would recommend this. Approve the $100,000 that was agreed upon last year. Tear down the equipment that currently exists there in the existing tot lot. However, put up signs that say, for example, thank you for your patience as we plan a new tot lot. That way, people be aware that yes, it's torn down, but there's something better that's going to be coming. Then I suggest that that Liz meet with a ground planner once again with updated information on costs and supplies due to COVID. That we look at the existing tot lot and its existing size. And the other thing I was going to mention is there's an area. I don't want to try to put it on my screen because I wasn't able to do it earlier. But there's an area. If you look at the 2019 master plan, there's an area that they're calling a dog park, which sits on the southeast corner of the park. When I looked at the topo map.
That has to do with the master plan, and we agreed not to mention that.
Oh, okay. Well, the only reason I'm talking about this is just the location. So let me phrase it this way. If you look at the southeast corner of Lake Gerar, which is right behind the VIA area, that is an area, when you look at the topo map of that, the slope of that land compared to the topo map that's presented underneath the existing proposed playground, is this. Why isn't that, or why hasn't that been considered for a location for a smaller tot lot? Because it meets 2 criteria that are very important. Number 1, it is off the main Lake Avenue, which is busy. And number 2, depending on how it was laid out, there is direct access to the street there. And because there's parallel parking adjacent to that area, you can actually designate one of the parking space for handicapped, so they could enter directly into the park there. So that's just one of the suggestions that I have. I think that we should go ahead and, as I said, tear down the tot lot, but inform the people through signs that it is going to be, that we are planning something better. But I totally disagree with that existing footprint of the quarter acre, because all you need to do is go online for some of these some of these playground planners, and they have different size playgrounds that, based on the square footage. So let's see here.
Thank you, Terry. Remember, we also have your letter, so don't forget that.
Yes. So anyway, that's why I am proposing just minimize, the bottom line is minimize any artificiality that's put into that park. People come there for the natural elements, not the artificial elements. Liz Lingo said in her last meeting, actually, that she knows people that drive in from out of town to use the park. She did not say that people drive in from out of town to use the playground. So let's maximize the natural element there, minimize the artificial man-made elements there. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to Patricia Davis. Are you there?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Mills.
Thank you, Patricia. And also, we have your memorandum also in the agenda.
Yes, I'm only going to highlight a couple of new items. I know everybody has cell phone battery issues that might be a problem. So yes, you already have the correspondence I sent in on behalf of the Henlopen condominium owners. And I just want to reiterate that we enthusiastically support an ADA compliant tot lot for toddlers and young children. But I think we need to make the distinction that that's what a tot lot is. It's typically for 2 to 5, maybe 6-year-olds. What we do not support is expanding the tot lot into a playground for older children, which would be 3 times the size of the current tot lot. Also, the price tag of a minimum of $350,000, because I've done some research myself and I don't see how you can possibly stick to just $350,000. But building an enormous playground on the banks of Lake Gerar doesn't make sense. And that's the one thing I haven't heard in this entire half-hour, 45-minute discussion is what's the environmental impact of building a 1/4-acre playground on the banks of Lake Gerar. And also, regardless of the grant money obtained, and I'm not sure, well, I'd be delighted if there was some grant money obtained in order to help the city budget. Lake Gerar simply is not large enough to support a structure that large without damaging the lake itself and the fragile ecosystem. We're not Grove Park, which is just land. We've got a lake in the middle of this park, and we need to think about that. So we would strongly encourage the Parks and Recreation Department to commit to identifying an alternative ADA compliant playground for older children in the future, and of course with the consideration and discussion with the commission, but move forward immediately with installing an ADA compliant tot lot in Lake Gerar now. I believe I heard Ms. Lingo talk about Grove and Stockley also being having deteriorated, and that might have to be replaced in a year or 2. Well, then perhaps that's where the playground ADA compliant equipment be installed. I also just want to say that I was delighted to actually see the excellent presentation given earlier this morning at the 9 a.m. Mayor's Workshop meeting by Todd Frickman of Envirotech Environmental Consulting regarding the Lake Gerar management plan. And I think if nothing I have said or any other people have said concerns you, I think his presentation should be sending off alarm bells regarding the health of Lake Gerar. I would respectfully suggest that if any money is set aside in the budget over and above the $100,000 for the ADA compliant tot lot, perhaps it should go to improving the health of Lake Gerar to include stormwater management plans, perhaps a plan to control the goose population, to preserve the wetlands, to improve the water filtration system, and a plan to prevent further soil erosion rather than installing this enormous structure in Lake Gerar. Finally, I guess I'll leave you with this question because I haven't seen anything about this and no one raised this question. Have any studies been done to determine the environmental impact of a 1/4-acre playground on the banks of Lake Gerar? And I'll just leave you with that thought. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Patricia. With that, that's all the members of the public have spoken, and we thank you. And back to the commissioners. Again, our next budget meeting is budget meeting number 4, Friday morning, February 19th. I would expect that we come up with some solutions and a path forward for the city manager and Liz in this topic. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, so we're going to be getting like an itemized list or the details on some of the options. Is that what we agreed?
I can send you what we had from last year, and then we can take into account 10% price increase plus the fence and landscaping.
Okay, because my big question is, again, I think we're conflating a bit the tot lot versus playground. I don't know if any of those plans or any of those itemizations were just for the tot lot or not, because we really need to see that.
So are you asking for a whole new design just to keep it as it is, but adding in the hard surface walkway to the playground and fitting what we can in that existing fence, kind of?
Perhaps, or it might be slightly more than that. I guess what I'm saying is we've been talking, and I know Commissioner Gossett asked this question about, what makes it a tot lot, but a tot lot is specific equipment for specific ages, right? And I know that you had said in the survey that it showed that children that are older than that use the playgrounds. That's absolutely true. The problem is, because I went back and looked at that survey, it didn't say they used it at Lake Gerar. So they may be using it at, at Grove Park or whatever. And I believe I'm hearing the consensus being that we want to make it a tot lot. And if that's the case, and we want to make it an ADA tot lot, then that's the itemization we should be looking at next week, right?
Well, that would require like a whole, so if that's the direction everybody's in agreement, we're going to move forward with, then we can go back to the drawing board with our designer. But I hate to drag him around because we did this whole thing last year, proposing, adjusting. So, and he doesn't charge a design fee for any of this. So, I just want to make sure this is the direction that we want to move in, is keeping it kind of in that 5,000 square foot footprint. Because the minute, if you look at the way the trees are situated, the minute we expand it really at all, we go into trees pretty much on any direction.
I understand, but you said something I thought was very comforting a little while ago, is that you're intending to keep most of them.
Yeah, if you look at the topo, that is how it plays out, so to speak. And that being said, if there's a tree right on the peripheral, I would hope that we'd be able to figure out a way to keep it if, like you said, everybody's in love with the Japanese black pines.
All I was doing by speaking up again was just to say, are we clarifying that it's a tot lot we're all looking at, or what? Because I didn't want to just see all the plans next week and then have to make a compromise from there and not really know what we're getting.
I don't think we've decided.
Okay. Well, then do we need to see both? That's the question. There is a distinction.
There is.
Well, yes, to make an informed decision and an intelligent decision, we need to see what the options are and then what the implications in terms of cost. I don't know how, in short order, understand, what the environmental impact is. And that's unfortunate that in short order, it's very difficult to understand the environmental impact, but we can certainly, use some criteria that we have.
But don't you think we need to decide first whether we want to have a tot lot or a tot lot and a playground combination?
Yes.
And the other thing is I don't know if anyone heard Liz say this, but unless I misheard, but I think you talked about the surfacing being permeable and the amount of runoff it would suck off or rain is pretty significant. Did you not say that, Liz?
Yeah, so depending on which particular brand, if you will, or method, they're pretty permeable, probably more permeable than what we have. And then when you add in the fact that, we'll be replacing a lot of that turf there now, is using the word turf is being a little optimistic about it. It's a lot of sand with not a lot of coverage. So you don't get great stormwater absorption with that. But to be clear, whether it percolates through the ground, it all ends up in Lake Gerar. Everything that, the two drains further down that are on the road, anything that goes in through the soil, the only stuff that would be what gets sucked up by the trees.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree? You're muted.
I too would like to have that option. What can we do with the square footage that now exists in the tot lot? And how much will it cost? And and I would also ask the public who is watching this presentation, or is watching this discussion. We have some pretty smart people out there. I'd like to have some input from them, because they have obviously been doing research and found that that maybe we may not be confined to just one swing set if we use that particular square footage, that the existing tot lot. I'd like to see what we could do with that existing space, Liz. And likewise, I have heard that there are significant differences in permeability depending on what you put down as far as rubberized surfaces. Yeah, I'd like to see those. I'd like to see that option in addition to the option that you're recommending. Thank you.
Liz, are you able to get, even just a sketch plan for next week with the descriptive information of what will fit in the current footprint and what it would possibly look, just the equipment, what it would possibly look like, and try to get.
Well, we have our designer, and, that's why it's so important versus researching things online and Elements that they're IPMA certified so they can verify equipment use zones and accessibility and stuff. I can't say if he can have it in a week. That seems very much like a tight time frame to me, but I don't know what he has going on.
Almost 2 weeks.
So the meeting is actually in 10 days. Maybe you can contact him this evening or tomorrow morning, first thing. Just tell him some of the issues that we're coming up against, and hopefully he can get something for next Friday's meeting.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Burns that options, I think, are helpful. So I would like to see what can be done in the existing footprint, and then what can be done as a compromise between the large size and the existing size.
So we want two new designs?
Well, does anybody else agree? Or, there's an investment of time here. If Jay, you're okay with that? Seeking a compromise, sign 50% bigger than what it is now, but definitely not the previous size, what was proposed. Is that all right?
Did you guys have a consensus if we wanted it to be the 2 to 5 or the older children?
I would like to see a tot lot designed ADA compliant in the existing location. And I would also listen to what Commissioner Burns requested. That's what if you have to make a compromise, what would it be? How small would it be?
Well, I agree with the parameters of tot lot, existing footprint, but also 50% bigger, or something like that. Give us a compromise option. Commissioner Byrne, did you
agree?
Are you comfortable with that?
That would be helpful. Yes, thank you.
All right. So if there's no further comment, I think Liz and Sharon have their marching orders, and we appreciate your input today. And I think it would be helpful to have that information, as well as at least some kind of aerial, if you will, showing the footprint, so that we can have a better understanding of which trees might remain and which trees might be consumed to enlarge it just slightly in that same vicinity or location. With that, if you're fine with that, thank you all. Thank you for the public for contributing. With that, we've got Parks Master Planning. Do we want to do that? Nobody really wholesale showed any interest in it. And if not, then we'll go to Grove Park Canal Dock. Is that all right? So we've got, for the Grove Park Canal Dock, the purpose of this discussion, unlike this morning's, is to discuss funding and maintenance programs. And I know we have Mark Carter, an officer of the Lewis Rehoboth Canal Improvement Association, here to answer any questions. We've also got Evan Miller, who provided a summary of the fundraising in our document packet, and is willing to review that summary of the funding so far. Evan, I would find it useful to have an overall view, from a high view, on What was the overall budget? How much did the city obligate itself at the beginning? Explain the 280,000, and where do we stand today in terms of, people keep asking, are we getting paid back that $280,000, et cetera. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Evan.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So Commissioners, in your packet, there is a summary of fundraising spreadsheet that I know I have presented at previous meetings. So what you'll see in the spreadsheet basically includes one table, which is all of our funding sources for the project. The first column, or the first row, is the LRCIA funds that have been transferred to the city. So the city's received 2 checks from the LRCIA totaling $317,500. And in the notes column there, you'll see the breakdown of all those funding sources, with $2,500 still pending from WISPAS. Underneath that, the next couple rows are the grant funds that we had secured for the project. They include a combination of the Community Transportation Fund, the ORPT grant, our Transportation Alternatives Program grant, which is DELDOT, the Community Environmental Project Fund, and then a bond bill appropriation from the state. And then lastly is the city's capital budget contribution of $280,000. You'll recall the commissioners authorized the use of up to $280,000 from the capital budget for this project. So in total, we have roughly $1,314,000 of funds that were raised for the project. Just underneath that, that table shows our contract amount for the project. So you'll recall that our initial contract sum with Thompson & Sons was $1,254,306. With that being said, we entertained several change orders. Notably, one was a pretty large change order credit. And we received that change order credit first. That was the first change order. And from there, the other change orders that we received were relatively small. But overall, we had a revised contract sum that was under the initial budget. So the project did come in under budget. So the original contract was $1,254,000, and the revised contract where we stand today is $1,216,000. And then the final table there just shows the construction administration service of landscape architecture service, which was paid by the LRCIA. The city did not pay any construction administration for the project. That totaled $79,200. So overall, we've essentially raised roughly $100,000 more than our contracted amount for the project.
So Evan, the layperson would look at this and say the funds have raised of 1.3 million roughly. The cost so far is 1.2 million roughly. That leaves $100,000. How does that marry to the $280,000? You know, is that 100,000 supposed to go back to the city to reimburse them for the 280,000? Because I wasn't on council then, but my recollection that this was not really a gift as much as a potential loan.
Sure.
With the hope that the city could get paid back.
Yeah, and that's right, Mayor. So essentially, the commissioners authorized up to the $280,000 from the capital budget. But with the revised contract sum being $1,216,000, you could say that the city has only obligated $180,000 for the project.
Okay. We'll go to Commissioner Gossett.
Yeah, Evan, I know this is not part of this specific chart, but what was the cost to the city for the preliminary site work that was done?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'd probably have to go back and pull some invoices.
If memory serves me correct, it was a little over $100,000.
Right, I will have it.
The $100,000, Commissioner, was actually all of the fees that the city had paid landscape architecture services from back when we were paying retainers and doing the design for the project. So that went back several years, but that included all of the fees that the city had or all the work that the city had requested prior to actual construction of the dock.
Correct, but bottom line is if we didn't just build the dock, we wouldn't have had those expenses, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that there's a line that was in the update we got in October that isn't on the current one, which is that the landscape services expenditures for projects. In addition to the construction administration, there was the total that was paid to LAS between July 2018, December 2019, that was about 112,000. So in a sense, I guess you could say this 100,000 we're ahead now reimburses that, you know, not the LRCA, but it would reimburse that. But there's a bit of a catch to it in two respects. One is that the ORPT grant, which is on our chart today, where it says spent after that, for that 44,000, I think that was spent toward some of those LAS costs previously. In other words, since it says spent, is the 44,000 not part of the 1.314 because it was already spent, or what? I'm confused about
No,
that.
so that portion, the ORPT grant was a total of $90,000. So half of the grant had gone towards the actual construction of the dock, and then the other half had gone towards the design and the other fees that were paid to landscape architecture service prior. Yes.
Okay, well, in that case, then what we're left with in terms of all those expenses that Commissioner Gossett was talking about is about 55,000 that has not been covered from those previous expenses to LAS. So in
Thank
that
you, Commissioner.
we're about
Go ahead.
dead. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree?
Evan, I was not on the commission at the time, but I seem to remember something about a memorandum of understanding. Could you just brief me quickly on what that was, that MOU?
If I was being honest, I don't know a whole lot about the MOU, so I don't know that I could talk to that personally.
So, I can just briefly state, Commissioner, that the MOU was in place, so the city and LRCIA would both understand that any of the city's contribution would only be paid if those funds were needed above and beyond what was raised. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it does, and I suspect these are needed.
Well, I want to say something about the MOU. You know, watching it from out in the audience, the $280,000 was obligated by the commissioners at that time prior to designing and executing the MOU, which I think is a terrible, terrible process. Anyhow, I just had to share that. Anybody else? Commissioner Sronowski?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Your hand was raised.
I know.
Anybody else?
Let me just add one thing to that, which is and it's great that we're ahead, whether we're ahead 100,000 or we're ahead 50,000 or whatever. But isn't part of the reason we're ahead is that first change order was to take out the maintenance that was going to be in there for a couple of years. I understand it was probably estimated too high, or that LRCI is going to do it at their own expense, maybe, or something. But I guess I'm just wondering, shouldn't we earmark whatever we're ahead for maintenance going forward?
Well, at some point, but we should not be obligated to do the maintenance for the first 2 years. The obligation is under LRCIA. Maybe Mark Carter can address that for us. Is that all right, Mark?
Yeah, hello, Mayor.
Mark, you there?
Yes, hello, Mayor, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mark. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you, Evan, for providing the overview there. And also, thank you for being very easy to work with as we work through all these different funding sources and such. I have a couple quick notes. One is, I think what Evan laid out here gives a pretty nice description of the funding sources. And what I would like to ensure is on the record for the commissioners is the CTF funds, the ORPT grants, the 300,000 from DelDOT, and the Community Environmental Project Fund and bond bill. Those funds all were due to a direct partnership between the city and the Canal Improvement Association to raise those funds. So when we look at funding raised, that's pretty significant. The fact that $300,000 from DelDOT would not have entered the city budget in any way without a conversation where they visited the site and believed in the project. And I just want to ensure that's out there to know that the partnership between the city and the Canal Improvement Association allowed a lot of these to happen. And the Canal Improvement Association initiating the conversations, sitting down with the representatives, senator and such, and laying out the project was where a lot of these funds came from. Another note is there were some funds that came off the top of the project with the cost, adjustments and such, which were, I think, great to help keep the project and get it under budget. But there were also funds that were asked for that were beyond the scope in the sense of, the city said we need this and that, in the sense of some things like cameras, lights, fire suppression systems. So really some things are, like anything, there's a bit of a give and take. And some of these funds that were added in were not part of the initial, what we worked on fundraising. And I don't think that's really a bad thing because like any project, you're going to identify something like this should occur, or this should, this could be taken out. And I think our relationship together working with, the town manager and Evan and others was great. I do also want to stress the $90,000 from the ORPT grant. A portion of that early on was utilized, as mentioned, for the essentially the construction documents that allowed the project to go to bid and allowed more funding sources to come in and such. So that's how that was utilized. As far as the MOU question, the MOU was, as explained, to move forward with the project. A lot of the funds that were available would expire and go away if the project didn't move forward. And the city would basically look at losing, $750,000 that could go towards the project. And that's how the MOU came about, that was an agreeable way to move forward and continue a public-private partnership as we did and get the project to move along. And the fact is that since the project came in under budget, I think that says a lot about making something happen and adding an amenity to the town. And also, I believe that during a year which nobody saw was coming, that was a challenging year. And fundraising did continue on our part, and we're continuing to look at raising more funds. So we didn't stop as soon as the MOU occurred. We actually raised funds throughout 2020, and we've been providing everything we can to the project.
And Mark, let me just add, I have the MOU in front of me, that is specified in here, that the LRCIA would continue to raise funds, and any fundraising activities to reduce the city commitment to complete the project is in here as well. So what you just said is correct.
And one other point I think is the project under the contract with the contractor and such, the project is warranted for the first several years, which would cover maintenance and such initially. And that gives time to generate some more funds to go into whatever type of restricted donation or such could be applied to, helping to defray some costs of maintenance for the city.
Thank you, Mark. Commissioner Legree, you're muted.
Thanks for reminding me. You have to do it every time. Thank you, Mark. Thank you a lot. And I'm glad to hear your forward outlook on this. However, it also has consumed lots of time by city people. City manager, public works director, Evan has spent hours and hours working on this and keeping things going and helping wherever they could. So, and I'm glad that happened because I really believe deep in my heart in the Lewis Rehoboth Canal, and I think it's a tremendous asset for our community, and I'd love to see it go forward. But we've put a lot of hours in on that ourselves. Thanks for everything that you've done, Mark.
Thank you, Jay. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I think it is remarkable that it's come in on budget. I mean, with a few things taken out, I realize, but still come in, and not the contingency wasn't used. I think all that's very positive, especially as Mark said, the environment we're in. But I believe the city manager was reading the MOU a minute ago, and I thought she said that basically that the LRCA would continue fundraising. Is that happening? In other words, is there still a prospect from here that some of that 280
extra fences are we paying?
something happen?
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Anybody else? If not, we'll, Mark, if you would hang tight, we'll go to the members of the public that may have questions or comments. Walter Brittingham?
Very progressive.
Mr. Perry, are you still off? Terry Eskew, any comments?
I think.
If not, Patricia Davis, any comments? Nope. And we've got Nancy Alexander. That's it for the members of the public. We thank you, Mark. Apparently there's no more questions.
Wait, I asked.
I want to thank you. What?
What happened? Something happened when I was talking, and I don't know if you and the city manager heard me, but I was thanking the city manager for reading the MOU, but in it says that that LRCA is going to continue fundraising. So I was asking if going forward, even though the project's finished, if there was still that prospect that they were going to be raising funds.
Mark Carter?
Down to 280.
Mark,
yes, I'm here. Sorry I didn't hear that the first time. It was a bit garbled, so I didn't catch. I only heard you say MOU and then it cut off, so I apologize for that.
So that's what happened. Okay.
As far, and I'm sorry, I was in Lewis for a call, so I'm in a parking lot making my call to you guys because of my schedule today. Sorry about that. So it could be my location perhaps. The fundraising continuing, we have recently applied for another community environmental project fund grant. And I don't know how we did on that because they don't do announcements till later in the spring timeframe or early summer. We are continuing some other efforts as well. And one of the positives is when a project is complete like this, a lot of times that's where you can see some additional support come in. Because folks are like, oh, this is a reality versus a dream or such. So I think there's some prospects for some continued fundraising for certain. And also, as an organization, we're looking at, like many groups right now, we're monitoring a little bit the current COVID times to see, we'd like to hold a fundraiser of some type to generate funds that would be turned over to maintenance and such. But live events right now are kind of on a little bit of a hold, so we're kind of monitoring, and we also want to wait till the weather breaks so that folks could actually be on the water and such, and not snow one day and sunny the next right now.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Susan?
Yeah, that's fine.
All righty. Commissioner Sernowski?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just Mark touched on it, but I thought one of the things that usually gets a lot of public support and more funding for a project like this is when you do a grand opening or an open house for it, and you turn that into a fundraiser and you get more support from that, like Mark mentioned. So I'm hopeful that they'll be able to do that later this year, and we do get some more funding from something like that.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, we thank Mark Carter for being here. We appreciate it, Mark. And Evan Miller, we appreciate you doing the chart and maintaining the chart and providing a summary for that. With that, we'll go to the next item. We've talked about some individual items. Lake Gerar Tot Lot, Parks Master Planning, there seemed to be no interest. Grove Park Canal Dock, we just finished. Is there any other specific topics anybody would like to bring up?
Yes, Mayor, I have something that I'd like to share today.
Yes, sir.
This is exploring the possibilities of looking at the parking lot at Grove Park to turn into a metered parking lot. Are always looking for, we're doing well at spending money, but I think to look at some new resources, opportunities for revenue. And I prepared a little presentation here that I'd like to share. So here's what my thoughts process is on this is that as we look at continued revenue sources to support general operations and future CIP projects, I'd like us to think about the following, and that's changing the parking lot at Grove Park from free parking to a metered lot. Currently, there are 36 spaces in the lot, 3 of which are handicapped accessible. Considerations to be made when at this proposal would be to set aside 6 spaces for the exclusive use of the Rehoboth Beach Museum, Chamber of Commerce Visitor Center, and Main Street. So these spaces would be free when each of the businesses are open to the public. And the meters would not go into effect until 3 p.m. on Tuesday to accommodate all free parking for the farmers market, which is a great attraction for the city. So if that's the concept, I want to look at the actual revenue potential here. This season, the meters begin on Friday, the 28th of May and end on Sunday, the September 19th for a total of 115 days. And this calculation was made before we passed our Mondays are free. So that would go back in to figure into this a little bit. But the currently hourly rates at the west end of town are $2. Meters are in effect from 10 to 10, so that's a 12-hour limit. So based on that, the potential revenue by establishing a metered lot, the revenue realized would be 115 days times 12 hours is 1,380 hours per space per season. That 1,380 hours times $2 is $2,760 per space per season. Figure that at the 36 spaces is $99,000, $99,360 total revenue from that lot per season. But then we also have to accommodate for the farmers market, which again, 33 spaces. They would be free from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. There's 16 Tuesdays times the 5 hours. It's 80 hours per space. 80 hours at $2 is 160 per space. 36 spaces times 160 is 5,760 in revenue. Main Street, Chamber and Museum, the 6 spaces are free daily from 10 to 5, which are the operating hours of those organizations. Again, 115 days times 7 hours, 805. 805 at $2 is $1,610. 6 spaces, 1610 is 9660. So the total revenue potential is in the blue there at 99,360 minus the farmers market and the guest speakers. So that's adjusted revenue, again, for full capacity would be 83,940. So everybody's not going to park there all the time. So I just took the arbitrated figure of 75% occupancy, if you will. So that would realize us 62,955. Again, based on all of these assumptions. But that's about $63,000 of potential added parking revenue that would go to the general fund or specific projects or something of that nature. So taking that thought process there, then also just kind of looking at how to operationalize this for our upcoming season. We'd have to update the parking map, the website, and the printed to reflect this change. We'd have to inform the museum, the visitor center, the chamber, the Main Street, the farmers market, the change in the parking lot operations. Establish some city policies and procedures for the following, providing dashboard passes for the museum, the visitor center, and the Main Street. Communication process that for issues that arise if someone's not quite aware of what's going on. So that's informing our communications department and also police and also our meter readers. Free during the parking farmers market, free during museum sponsored events if they have a special event, opening of an exhibition, what have you. certainly those meters would not be in effect. We'd have to determine the number and the locations of the multi-space meter, purchase and install the meters, and then update the current signage in the parking lot as appropriate. There are currently signs, small signs in there over a couple of spaces that say these spaces are reserved for museum, visitor center, and Main Street. So that's in a nutshell, but there's some work to be done, some thoughts to be given to that, but basically looking at about $63,000 in revenue that I don't feel we should leave on the table. So open for
Thank you,
comment.
Commissioner. I have a couple questions. You mentioned reserved parking spaces for the museum, Main Street, and Visitor Center. You mentioned 6 spaces. Is that 6 spaces, 2 spaces each agency? Or is that 6 spaces each agency?
No, that would be 6 in total. So they could divide them up as need be. There are currently 3 for the museum and 3 that are reserved on the other side that just have a sign saying used for visitor center at the present time.
I appreciate you doing your homework. It's food for thought. You know, there is a new dynamic at the canal, obviously, with the canal dock and parking there, and maybe we should be charging for that. I agree that don't want to interfere with the farmers market and the other agencies there. We may have missed the boat on the Chamber of Commerce magazine, because if you recall, they have a legal size map pulled out that shows the parking paid areas and the non-paid areas, so we might have missed that opportunity. Although Susan might know when the final day for.
I think it was on press when we voted last week for the meterless, so that was put in at
So
the.
it may have,
Yeah, I think.
it may have passed us, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the parking brochure. Sharon, do you know when the parking brochure is drafted and finalized?
That's not.
This is Evan. I'm actually working right now with a vendor on that project. They've asked for sort of a tentative deadline to have any changes to them by early to mid-March. That gives enough time to sort of implement the.
Very good. Commissioner Sharnowski, please.
Sure. I had my hand raised for a different topic, but I'll just comment on Commissioner Gossett's proposal as well. I think it's worth looking into. Certainly, I do think in the first year with putting in a new meter system, the signage, it's probably not going to be that much of a revenue generator the first year when you take into account. But obviously over subsequent years, it could be. So I think it's worth discussing. I just wanted to mention something else publicly. I have gotten quite a bit of questions regarding the Katz and Lynham contract. And this weekend, a citizen emailed both Commissioner Gay and I and referenced a news article that misrepresented, that made it, it stated that we were paying Katz and Lynham $192,000 to be on the beach. I've since talked to Chris Flood, who has had that article revised. So if anyone gets questions about that contract, that's why it was misstated in a news article that we, in fact, were paying $192,000 for people to make money on the beach. So that has since been revised. I just wanted to publicly mention that since it was misstated in the newspaper.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett, interesting proposal. It would be helpful. I'd like to see it on hard copy if you would present a support document to us.
Sure.
And I know that time is of the essence, essentially, so we would want to talk about that and try to come to a conclusion. If not today, then at our February 19th budget number 4 meeting beginning at 9 a.m. Are there any further feedback on, Commissioner Goss's proposal? If not by the commissioners, let's go to the public real quick.
I think,
Yes, sir, Commissioner Byrne?
yeah, let me just add, I like the idea and I think it's worth investigating a little bit further. But I don't think we should leave 60 to 70 grand on the table, and particularly now with the canal opening and other things going on the so-called west end of our city, I think it may be a good opportunity for revenue.
Well, can we, Patrick, you get your support document, share it with us, and we'll put it in the next agenda for the budget number 4. But in the meantime, if you also get it to Sharon, she can talk with the parking department people and any others to get their feedback on the logistics of implementing such a new system.
Certainly.
Sound all right?
Sure.
Commissioner Srnowski again?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you know, I am in favor of considering it, but we also really need to talk to Main Street, the Chamber of Commerce, and the museum to see if 6 spaces is enough, and what their visitation looks like in terms of number of vehicles and stuff. You know, they should be a part of the conversation.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So we'll go to the public real quick. Is Walter on? Yep.
I am. Thank you for a good meeting.
Thank you, Walter. Mark Carter, Rick Perry still off. Terry Eskew, Patricia Davis are all off, are all offline. Thank you very much. With that, is there any other comments to make on this year's budget? Commissioner Gay?
Well, I feel like I'm missing, I don't know if Sharon's still there. I don't see her still there, but I'm confused about something. First of all, we didn't get a CIP update in this latest packet. And previously there had also been a really good one that showed the status of the current fiscal year, the CIP for the current year. And it showed the amount deferred and what was actually spent. And what's on the projection that we got today doesn't match that, and I'm just confused about where we are, because I understand that things got deferred, and I understand the city manager said everything was going to be coming back, we'd be seeing it again, but some things got deferred 2 years. Example being the LED lighting, for instance. And I mean, I think that's a shame. I'd like to actually see it come back, and I suppose I thought some of this would kind of end up, you know, getting in the wash with the 350 for Lake Gerar playground or whatever, you know, that would be some shuffling around. And that hasn't happened yet because we haven't made a decision on the playground, but I still feel like we're missing a piece of what have we actually deferred from the current year, what's going into next year, what's getting deferred even beyond that, and just having up-to-date documents.
Commissioner, we'll send that to you again. It hasn't changed from last time, but it was included, but it was Bert's iteration from Munis, which doesn't show all that detail.
Yeah,
so we'll send it out again. You'll certainly have it for the next meeting. Okay. And my video connection is no longer working, so
okay. We're just about done. I guess my question would be, is there still any time to play around with some of those other things, or is it pretty much done and we're just fine tuning what's there?
Is there time
to look at, you know, to take a look at what's been deferred, what's in next year, whether we can bring anything back, whether we can earmark the funds that are from the sale of 84.
Certainly, you have 3 more budget meetings. There's time.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree?
Before we finally approve the Lake Gerar accretion project, I have a lot of questions about that, and that's still on the FY22 list that I've received. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I want to thank you. Again, our next budget meeting, budget number 4, is Friday, February 19th at 9 in the morning. And we appreciate everybody's participation, including members of the public that registered and talked, and thank the watchers otherwise. With that, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 3:59.